Okay, so this is going to be um final review of Letters for the Difference book, chapters 7 through 10. Um, and so yeah, let's do it. So chapter 7 talks about creating the illusion of control, and this one, I got a lot of good points. Like my notes, I make sure all the good ones. So one of the most important things to do is to not try to force the person you're negotiating with to admit that that you're right. Um, and this speaks to also like trying to force them to say yes. And another really important thing to do is to ask calibrated questions, um, because they help you gather more information. If you get just like you ask just yes or no questions, um, the other person is not going to be able to um, all they're answering is just a yes or no. That's not really, that's like a like all you're getting is like one information. While when you're asking a calibrated question like how questions or why questions, um, it gets the other person to think more about how to problem solve and what answer they should give you. Um, let's see. Another one is don't ask why, because why is accusatory and makes the other person defensive. Um, and second and last thing is to um, make sure that when someone is attacking you, you don't get defensive and you don't attack back. You instead try to calm down, pause the situation, and um, just avoid an angry emotional backlash because that's not going to continue the conversation. They'll most likely end the negotiation or conversation. Um, let's see, what else is there? Yeah. And asking calibrated questions can also kind of help the other person. If you're stuck in a situation, it kind of helps them feel like, I think an example he gave was this girl who was like working really hard for this company, but they weren't paying her. They're always saying next paycheck, next paycheck. Um, and she felt like she was being used. But by her saying, "How am I supposed to do that?" and then listing her problems, and it kind of helped the company understand her situation and give her what she needed to continue working, to continue doing her work. And so that's kind of the importance of calibrated questions, why they're so good in any kind of negotiation. But let's move on to chapter 8, which is guarantee execution. So you want to make sure that your execution is clear and concise, and anything, there aren't things that will, like outliers that will get in the way of the situation. Because most of the time, most important thing that you want to pay attention to is deal killers instead of um, deal breakers. Um, and what this means is, I think there was an example of them having a negotiation of escorting or getting these prisoners who were doing a prison break, but they're locked in some area, um, and they didn't know if they should come out, didn't feel safe coming out or giving themselves up because they weren't sure if the police would, beat them up when they went out. And so they negotiated and made promises that, okay, we'll take one of you guys out, we'll give you a walkie-talkie, and we'll bring you to jail, and we won't beat you up. We won't be doing anything bad, terrible. we'll escort you guys out safely, but we'll have this one person be, the person that like is an example. And because there wasn't clear communication between the negotiator and the police or the security people that were there, one of the security guys took away the walkie-talkie, not knowing that that was a necessary step in finishing the execution. Um, and so he, um, I should get in the middle. And so he kind of almost broke cause a deal killer, because after like they haven't heard back for like 40 minutes or something. I don't remember the exact time, but like a while. The prisoners inside the place were all confused and like, oh, they're actually beating him up, and like making these worst case scenarios situations, because they didn't really know what was happening out there. They didn't have a clue. um but negotiators were able to resolve that quickly, and resolve that deal killer, and like give back the walkie talkie. But that's why making sure your execution on your plan um is followed through, and there are any deal killers that can potentially break in the way is also really important. um Another thing is there is this 7, 35, 30, 38, and 55% rule, which they talked about in this chapter, which is that 7% of message is based on the words, 38% is based on the voice, and 55% is based on the language and face. Um, and this is why it's really important to have, an in-person conversation with this person you're negotiating with, because you can not just read, their because like words are words. They're they only provide 7%, and anyone can lie with like whatever they're saying. But the emotion, the tone of voice is the most important thing. Or no, it's 35% of like how important like a person's reaction is, and how truthful it is. Kind of reveals if they're angry or like their emotional state at that point. And then their facial cues, the ones where they can't control as much. They can't, some things just, and like a person's facial like face, like if they're angry or not, are they surprised? Like people can't really control that most of the time. Um, and so that's why that's like at 55%. Um, and then what is it? There's also the rule of three. So this is the rule of three is, so first of all, when someone gives you a yes, there are three kinds of yes. I think we talked about this in the past, but one is commitment, one is confirmation, one is counterfeit. So you don't. So a lot of the times people will say yes just to get rid of you, um, but they don't actually mean it. Um, and so that's a counterfeit yes. And then a confirmation yes is like it's actually, well, those are more like yeses, commitment yeses. I think is like an actual yes that you want, that like they're committed to the answer, um, committed to the decision or negotiation. Um, and so the rule of three is to basically to get the kind of yes that you want, a confirmation or a commitment, a committed one that like is a true yes that the person agrees and they fully agree with it, is to have them say yes 3 times without saying yes. So, I mean, the first one could be a yes, but the second and third, you can use labeling, such as, I think there's an example. So, labeling of like, oh, so seems like you like this, like this deal, and they'll say that's right, or have them say like that's right, or something in that kind of similar fashion. So they'll say it the second time, and the third time you can ask a calibrated question is, um, to so like using labels and calibrated questions to get the third yes. Um, so, and once you get the third yes, or third confirmation, then that's when you know that um, they are truthful with like their intent of following through with the deal. Um, another thing is to distinguish, like when a person is lying is the Pinocchio effect is a lot of times if someone's lying, they would oftentimes say more than what's needed, and they would also say, um, what was it? Yeah, there's and just make it more confusing. So like you don't really understand what's being said and like kind of bullshit the answer. Um, and yeah, another thing he talks about is using your name. It kind of humanizes you as a person. Um, yeah, and then, yeah, the last one is just use your own name. Kind of humanize you in your negotiation, makes a person see you as a person and be more willing to talk and be open about their feelings and emotions. Um, okay, next is chapter 9, bargain hard. Um, so there are three different types of bargainers. And it's important to understand what type of bargainer you are and what type of bargainer the person you're talking to is. So the three that they list is analyst, accommodator, and assertive. So the analyst is a person who negotiates by they're like single negotiators. They like to do solo work. They negotiate by themselves. And they like to do they're more reserved, quiet, and they like to do a lot of research beforehand, so they can come into negotiation prepared. One they talk about one of the negotiators' worst fears is being surprised, so that's why they would prefer to do a lot of beforehand work, beforehand research, um, than to actually go into the conversation and ask, because sometimes you can get the answer within 5 minutes, but there'd oftentimes research like 4 more hours beforehand just to get that information so they aren't surprised. um yeah, there are problem solvers, information aggregators. um yeah, so the next one is accommodator. So these are the people who are very talkative, um genuinely friend and friendly, and like the friendly type that you can talk to and want they kind of want to have a close relationship, want to form a friendship with. The importance is forming a connection, and even some way friendship with the negotiator. um and yeah, one thing about them is that it is extremely hard to find the objections that they have, um because they are working so hard to make a connection with you. Sometimes they would sacrifice the objections they have to do that. um, so one of the things to do as an accommodator is make sure you don't sacrifice any of your objections. um, but yeah, last one is assertive, which they believe time is money. These are the type of people that are very, I guess, just assertive. They have a clear direction of a plan and goal that they want to take. And they also like to be, um, the most important thing about them is they want to be heard. And so oftentimes, it doesn't even matter about the negotiation. They at least want to be heard first before you can talk and speak. Um, and the most important thing to get from assertive is that that's right, because that shows that you're understand, or for them is to get a that's right, I guess. um, so it's important to understand um, a person's bargaining type is because it allows you, because oftentimes people have the perception that like the other person is thinking the same. But if you're one of the a different negotiating type, then you may perceive things differently. So an example they gave is silence. So for an accommodator, if the other person is silent, they would assume that they're angry because they would understand why they're not talking. But to an analyst, it is just a person. They see silence as a person thinking in their head, and so they don't see it as as a other person being angry. They could just be seeing it as, oh, that person's thinking, or I'm silent because I'm thinking. And there can be confusions in perceptions and like what how people think and deal things. And I guess for the assertive, they take silence as oh, so the other person wants me to talk, or the other person doesn't have something to say. So don't take it as like other person being angry. So that's why it's really important to understand other person's bargaining type and try to feel out from your conversation with them what they are and who they are and like what how they bargain, um, so that you can kind of tailor your conversations, tailor your questions to better suit what you think they would like. So for a accommodator, they like to build relationships. So make sure you're building that relationship with them because that will heighten your chances of getting a better deal. Um, and so that's why in this they talked about negotiations. You don't want to follow the golden rule. You don't want to treat others how you want to be treated because people can have most of the time it's more likely for them to have a different bargaining style than you do. So you have to um, you want to do the black swan rule, which is you want to treat them how they want to be treated, to get your negotiation, because that yeah, so you basically you're tailoring to their interests and their needs, so you can get what you want. um, and then they also talk about and this is taking a punch. So this is being not afraid to receive the first punch, um, because oftentimes the other person will anchor. If you want the other person to anchor first, so that when you go, you can anchor second, and then have that be the focal point of the anchor. Because if you do it the other way around, if you go first, and the other person can anchor a second time, and then that's where the range of the negotiation price will be at. Um, and so that's why it's important to anchor second, and also important to be able to take the first hit. Um, Others don't use any real anger. Well, you can use anger, but use it um, strategically. There's a strategic umbrage. So if someone gives a really unrealistic deal, um, you can react in a way that like there's no way I can do that deal in some assertive voice, in some angry kind of angry way, to break the other person's perception. Okay, I must have said something wrong. This isn't the reaction I want from this other person, and so it'll make them rethink and reconsider the negotiation or their offer. Um, Use right questions and iMessages help be more assertive. Um, don't be no neediness. Um, have always have the walking mindset because you never want a bad deal. And use the Ackerman bargaining. So this is one, set target price. Two, set first offer at 65%. Calculate three raises of decreasing increments. So 85, 95, 85% to 95% to 100%. And then use lots of empathy and different ways of saying no to reach those goals. Um, and then when you're calculating the final amount, make sure you use a precise number so they think that you're actually doing clear calculations for the last for you know the answer that you want. And so like there is it gives a reason for why you chose that answer, and then they'll be more likely to like, okay, this they can't go more than this, so I have to accept this. And last thing is, if you can, throw in a non monetary item, um, it'll make them feel better, or it'll make them feel like, okay, he really doesn't have anything because he has to offer like a non-monetary item. That's conversation. Lastly is chapter 10. Let's find the black swan. So the black swan is basically the concept that going to be, everyone has known knowns and going into a conversation. They know what to look out for. But there are also a lot of unknowns, unknowns. So like the example they gave us, like people never thought there would be a black swan until, someone saw one, and that broke their perception of, oh, people always thought there was only white swans, but now there are chances of black swans. So it's the concept that, like, you're not going to go into a conversation fully knowing everything. There are going to be unknown factors out there that will affect the negotiation, and you kind of have to look for them, I guess. Um, so in this they also talk about different kinds of leverages. There's positive leverage, which is you have the capability to provide something to the other person that they want, and so you can deny that service, um, or deny giving it to them. So that is one form of leverage. Second form of leverage is negative leverage, which is you can make the other person suffer. So such as like kicking someone out or evicting someone. Um, and so you have more negotiation on the table, because they're kind of forced to, if they don't want to suffer, kind of forced to go with your offer, your decision. And the last one is normative leverage, which is basing your leverage on the other person's value. So like if a person is very morally high, you can use any contradicting statements that they say to make them re-question the offer, re-question what they said, because no one likes to be hypocritical. So normal leverage is hitting them at their morals and making sure that just hitting them at their morals. Next thing the chapter talks about is knowing their religion. So knowing their religion is basically the concept that people, sorry, it's that what is a person's world belief, and how do you tailor it towards that? And what is this is, and it's not like religion. It's more just, how does this person think, and how does this person, what is their world belief tied to, and how can you use that as a way to make yeah make your deal offer better. um I guess just using that in a way. um Next is the similarity principle. If you can find a similarity between the two, between both of you, then that kind of allows you to form a connection and makes it feel like you guys understand each other, um and therefore allow more, you know the other person to accept the offer more. Next is, make sure you have a reason for why you're doing things, and if you give a reason, people are more likely to accept it. And then if you give a reason within, related to the other person's religion, then they're even more likely to accept it because they can kind of understand or perceive it through the lens of their religion. Um, and another thing is, if they're acting irrational, if they're acting crazy, it's most likely that they're not crazy. It's just that they have other hidden black swans, hidden things that are causing them to react the way they are. So one of them is bad information. So if they're given bad information that, leaves them to believe that they're being tricked, or they just don't understand the full picture, and so they're coming at you for no reason. And best way to solve this is to give them the correct information. Next is they're constrained. There's something that's limiting them to continue with there's something, I guess, just something limiting them. And if you can find that, you can kind of use that black swan for to your advantage. I think one example they gave is a person, they're going to a person to buy a house, and by having a conversation, they're kind of able to pull the constraint that, oh, they're selling this house because they need to fund um, a different housing project somewhere else that they're like focusing on. And by using that leverage, they can make the other person feel they understood the other person was in like a sore spot, and so they can kind of use and abuse that. Their last one is of that is um, they have other interests. So you can pull out if they have other interests. That's another important thing to get. Last thing is to um, I know it's not last, but another thing is to make sure you get FaceTime. Like I said before, FaceTime helps you build, helps you see the facial stuff, that facial language and behavior, um, that, and also like tone of voice that you wouldn't get from like an email message. Um, and those are really important to understand the other person's emotional state, and how they actually see the deal, or offer. Um, and the last thing is um, observe unguarded moments. So oftentimes at the start and the end of that deal, people will reveal hidden things that because they're less guarded, um, and making sure you take advantage of that, and you can kind of um, see or try to figure out if there are any black swans that come from it. Because black swans are multipliers in negotiations, because they can, yeah. So that was it of chapter 10, or that was the finishing summary of Never Split the Difference. Um, and yeah, it was a good book. I learned a lot from it, took a lot of notes. We'll definitely be watching these again when I need to relearn the book. But it's also super late. I know this is like gonna be a super late video. It's like 2:16 for me, and I really need to go sleep because I have work tomorrow. But I promised I would finish this video. I finished this book today, so took the whole or most of the day reading, most of the night reading. I'm like super tired, but I don't made the promise I would finish it today, so I finished it today. And then I'm gonna start Who Not How next week, so I will be updating you guys on that book next week. Yeah, thank you for watching, and yeah.